Now, this is A5. Show you, does that? Yep. Julie? Of course. I'll show you, does that? Yep. Of course. Just let me know. Just a little bit familiar. Right. If I could see him, Julie. And did I realize that? If I could see him? Yep. Okay. I'm not sure, was that? For some reasons? Yep. Okay. So you realize that? I know, Julie. Of course. Do you did not want that? I know, Julie. Of course. Yeah, sure. Yep. Cause you sure you realize that? I know, Julie. Of course. Did I realize that? Yep. Definitely. If I can see him. Yep. If I can see him, Julie. Because I have no idea. Of course. You're not sure you realize that? I know, eventually. Right, yeah. You're not sure? Yep. Of course. I'm not sure I realize that. Yep. Sure you realize that? I know, eventually. Of course. You're not sure you realize that? Yep. Yep, no idea. Of course. Eventually? Yep. Okay. Not sure you realize that. Yep. Okay. Not sure you realize that. Yep. Did I realize that? Nope. Okay. No sure? Nope. Okay. Sure you realize that? Nope. Okay. Sure you realize that? Yep. Okay. Not sure you realize that? If I kiss him? Yep. Okay. You have no idea. Of course, eventually. Right. Sure you realize that? Yep. Eventually. If I kiss him, definitely. Of course. Definitely. So if I kiss him? Yep. Okay. Not sure I realize that. Yep. Because I am not sure. Was eventually. Of course. Sure you realize that? Yep. Of course. Did I realize that? Right. If I could assume. Yep. Okay. Not sure you realize that? Yep. Let's try to be good with ours. I know, eventually. So if I can assume. Yep. Eventually. Of course. I know. I went out of nowhere. Definitely. Right. So if I can see him. Yep. Eventually. Of course. Eventually. Right. Did I realize that? Yep. Did I realize that? If I can assume eventually. Because I have no idea. Of course. Because I am not sure. Yep. Eventually. Cause I am not sure. Yep, eventually. Of course, eventually. Cause I have no idea. Of course. Did I realize that? Yep. Right, of course. Eventually. You have no idea. Right. You know, sure. Yep. Eventually. Of course. Did I realize that? Yep. Because I am no sure eventually. Right. Sure you realize that? Yep. Okay. You're no sure? Yep. Of course. Eventually. If I assume. Yep. Because I am not sure. Yep. Eventually. Of course. Definitely. Yep. If I assume eventually. Of course. Did I realize that? Yep. If I assume eventually. Of course. Did I realize that? Yep. Because I have no idea. Of course. Eventually. Of course. Did I realize that? Yep. Of course. Eventually. Did I realize that? Yep. Because I am not sure. Did I realize that? Yep. Of course. Eventually. If I assume. Eventually. Because I have no idea. Because I am not sure. Did I realize that? Yep. Okay. And bye.